damn good coffee and hot. Ouch. Good morning, folks. Me and my bad shoulder are wishing you a happy new week. It's Monday morning, March 6th, 2023. Uh, a pretty eventful weekend for me. Had a gig Friday night, and it was a good one. No, it was Saturday night. Excuse me. I lose track of the days. But I very sorely needed good gig because I had been in a terrible slump and feeling like, you know what? It's probably been, seriously, 3 months since I felt like that was fun to play. And it was a fun performance. Saturday night, I keep wanting to say Friday night. Saturday night was off the hook. Great crowd, Garden Grill, Smithtown, New York. Really, really enjoyed playing. But again, with the shoulder thing, I'm noticing, and I certainly felt it Saturday night, that it's about time for me to take up some Tai Chi or yoga, get out of the chair and get back in shape. Since the start of the pandemic, I have become extremely sedentary and out of shape. The most exercise I think I got in the last 3 years was last week walking around New York City with Carl. By the way, Carl is probably back in the UK by now. I think his plane left early this morning. Maybe he's over the Atlantic Ocean somewhere. Safe travels, buddy. Anyway, that was probably the most exercise I got. Saturday night on the gig, my arm was and wrist and shoulder, everything was locking up, and my hand cramped, like in this position, and I was panicking. We're playing, and we don't take breaks, and Mikey's calling out songs, and my hand is frozen. Tell a few jokes. And did enough to calm myself down. Actually tore my thumb from my hand because it was locked, and eventually could kind of form some. It was towards the end of the set. We got through it, but great pain. And I said to myself, I got to do some Tai Chi or yoga, start to get some kind of physical shape. And my wife caught me last night. She said, "You're doing yoga?" I'm just trying I'm just trying to feel my body again. But waking up with a frozen shoulder this morning, what's called getting old. People like me, that happens to you. Sorry. It will happen to you too. Eventually you'll get to this station in life where everything hurts, but it doesn't help when you sit in a chair for a few years. You gotta get up and exercise. And I'm at the point where it's imperative for me to get out of the chair, get back to doing something physical to take care of myself. Well, not even to take care of myself, just to be able to get through a gig without locking up and feeling, I don't know, scared. Anyway, eventful weekend. Chris Rock finally let loose with what's been on his mind for about a year now. Interesting stuff to see him kind of go really hard at Will Smith. Now, I'm just gonna. Will Smith obviously was in the wrong. We all know what happened, and it's been talked about at at nauseum. So there's no point in bringing it up. But Chris Rock was talking about how Jada Pinkett Smith had hurt Will Smith much worse than Will Smith ever hurt Chris Rock with that slap. But then understanding that he's a very hurt broken guy, went full bore at him and really tore him a new one. So you could talk about sympathy and empathy and understanding how a man was hurt. But if you're going to continue to kick him, are you really being sincere about that? And now that was my takeaway from Chris Rock. Yeah, I understand Chris Rock had probably had a lot on his mind, a lot to get off his chest about the thing. But if you really feel like the cause of this, if you're sincere, in saying the cause of this was this extreme emotional pain that Will Smith was going through. You got to watch the special to know what I'm talking about. But he did mention that quite a bit. If you really feel that's the case, then you really got to just back off and not bury him even harder. That's my take on it. Maybe is it possible to be sincere and empathetic about what Will Smith was going through and still bury him like that? I don't know. Not for me, obviously. Maybe for Chris Rock. Anyway, we're going to talk about history today. Got a history educator. You know, I love history, but I would say this: it's getting harder to know, harder and harder to believe in some things that are passed down as history, and we're going through a period in America right now where people want to dictate history on politically friendly terms according to their own agenda. History has to be, if it's going to teach us anything at all, it has to be the bare facts. It has to be straight up. It has to be, as an ex used to say, unsugarcoated. She used to say, "Don't sugarcoat it. Just give it to me straight." I think that's what history has to be for it to be an effective teacher in anything. I hope I get this name right. Barbara Ann Mojica is MASASSDA is a historian and retired educator. Her education career spanned more than 40 years, serving as a teacher, special educator, principal, and school district administrator, using the whimsical Little Miss History character to narrate her book series. She makes learning history a fun-filled adventure. Um, for children, I presume, because getting adults to learn history can be like pulling teeth, which is why you're here today. Uh, Barbara firmly believes if you don't know your history, you don't know what you're talking about. Well, maybe I don't know what I'm talking about, but welcome in. Open your ears, open your eyes, and open your mind. Excuse me. I don't know anything. And welcome in, Barbara Ann Mojica. Did I get the name right, first of all?
Yes, perfect.
Oh, great. Thank you for being here. So we do live in a time the quote there, if you don't know your history, you don't know what you're talking about. But we live in a time where history has become uncertain. Yes.
Oh, for sure. And I'm sorry to hear about your frozen shoulder. I've been there, that went through that experience once. It is not fun.
Yeah.
But wishing you the best with it.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah,
I just
I
like to complain. Actually, I'm a
well, we all have to do that once in a while.
yeah,
Can't keep it all in, right?
yeah. So yes, but so um, now talking about history. History cannot do you agree with my position that uh history can't be effective to teach us anything if we're going to try to sugarcoat it or only put it in terms that make us feel warm and fuzzy about our past? Yes.
Yes, of 100%. And what do we do in our 21st century world of fast communication? We want the answers immediately, and we want the answers that are going to please us personally. So everything is opinion oriented rather than fact oriented. And because we are so in tune with our social media, we are being fed algorithms that are constantly reinforcing this one sided position. We go online and we talk to a certain group of people. The algorithm keeps feeding us information from the group of people who believe or align with our values because those are the ones we click on. It's kind of like a never ending cycle. We keep getting reinforced, reinforced, reinforced with the algorithm that's presenting one side of the story. And our children in school are not being taught how to think. We are teaching them here in the United States, anyway, especially according to this Common Core curriculum that has its emphasis on bringing everyone up to that same standard. You must all pass the test in order to be declared competent. But what are our children being declared competent in? Arbitrary standards. And what has happened to us is in the past 20 years, our position in education, that is the United States standing in education, has gone from being the number one in the world to, last I looked, we're about 20 and falling fast. So, what has all of this gotten us? Nothing. We've gone backwards, and our children are constantly being fed information to pass the test. We're taking away from that critical time where we're teaching the children the process of thinking, how to arrive at a conclusion independently by observing, by analyzing, by inferring, by putting information together.
Uh,
They're being fed this idea that you just have to pass the test. There's just one answer.
I know, and I'm listening to what you're saying, and it sounds more like a scientific method rather than historical, because history is about knowing facts about things in the past. But the question I have is, though sometimes the facts we are taught, the supposed facts, are not facts; they are um, fabrications in some cases. So I want to start there because it sounds like you're talking more about scientific method. Is history a is history a study that requires us agreeing upon what happened?
No, not necessarily, because if you're really going to apply that process of critical thinking, you may not get to one fact or one conclusion because sometimes the answer is there is no definitive answer.
Right.
There are many possibilities. And
There is.
today we're looking for that one answer. What does a child do when a child is faced with a question? Most likely the child will go to the internet, they will Google it, and they
Yeah.
will look at the first answer that they're given. Oh, this must be the answer. Do they go to page two, three, four, five to see other possibilities, to gather other information? No, they take that first answer. And then that's it, that's the simple way. I know, I went to school a long time ago before the advent of the computer being used to gather our information. I had to go to the library. I had to read books. I looked at several different books. I got several different types of information. Then I had to sort through this information. I had to then, after I sorted through the information, put it together in some kind of logical fashion. And then, only after I've done all of that, I would analyze it. I would think about what else was going on at the time. What other people were influences? How were they reacting to each other? After doing all of that, I would put together a conclusion, or maybe I would put together several conclusions, but it was a thoughtful process that involved several steps. And you were using your own brain to get the information. You weren't relying on others to tell you what the facts are or what their opinions of those facts are. So
Uh,
you
uh,
didn't have those influences and you went through this whole critical thinking process. The schools aren't really teaching children how to do that today.
I hear what you're saying, but I'm gonna push back a little bit because this is my job here. I'm as old as you, and I don't remember, or of the same age, around the same age as you. I'm guessing that anyway, but I don't remember being in school and being encouraged for to check multiple sources. And I'll start with, because American history. Let's start with that. I know there's more to history than American history, and a lot of people would be surprised to find that out. Uh,
Oh, definitely.
but like we just accepted at face value that George Washington chopped down a cherry tree and said, "I cannot tell a lie." But it turned out, as I got older, or at least now I'm being told, that that wasn't true. So, but we were never told, fact check that, look for other sources, and all that kind of stuff. It was just something we were dictated to by teachers. So, has that really changed that much?
Well, the thing that's changed is that history really isn't very much taught in the schools on that elementary level. On the elementary level, history was presented as facts. We had history, we had geography. We didn't have this kind of mishmash of social studies where we kind of combined a little bit from each discipline. And in elementary school, yes, you had history. You were taught the facts. So there were the explorers, and we discovered this in that year, and then we looked at a timeline, and we said, okay, so this happened in 1500, this happened in 1600, this happened in 1700. It was more factual. But then as you got into high school or more, advanced studies, you started to do more of the critical thinking. But it wasn't done on that basic, elementary or maybe even high school level, because in high school you were again trying to pass that test. I know I went to school in New York and we had the New York State Regents. So you had to pass the World History Regents, you had to pass the American History Regents, and you had to know all of those facts. True, there were essay questions that required you to do a bit of thinking and analyzation, but most of it was the facts, and that's not what knowing history is. You have to understand. I mean, history isn't just a series of dates and timelines. The real value of knowing history is being able to interpret and understand how all of those things are related to the larger story. So it gives you a broader perspective. It provides you with a sense of identity. It gives you uh, an understanding of cultural heritage. And in doing all of these steps, you learn how to assess evidence. You learn how to uh, find examples pro and con. You learn to think, uh, again, to think critically. So it's a longer process. It starts out with just facts, but it evolves into something, much more complicated than that. So if you're truly understanding history, you're going into that deeper analysis. And again, in our 21st century world, people are not attuned to thinking that way. They want the instant answer. They don't want to have to spend time figuring anything out because we're multitasking. We're moving from one thing to the next thing to the other thing. And in doing all of those things, we're not doing any of them well. We're just kind of dabbling in one thing, the next thing, the next, and it's creating a real sense of uh, unease and dissatisfaction. We're not really getting to the bottom of any one thing, and I think it just creates this kind of malaise and a feeling in the back of our minds that we're not really competent at anything. We're just kind of like mulling along and going through the motions of getting through things.
What a terrible way to go through life. Just
Yeah, well,
yeah,
that's the way I think a lot of people really are feeling, and I think that's one of the reasons we have uh, problem, so much of a problem with mental health. I mean, I think children are realizing this. not maybe it's not in the forefront of their consciousness, but I think it's in the back of their heads.
I'm sure it is. Well, I shouldn't say I'm can't be in the mind of a child, right? I mean, I'm an old person, but I'm pretty much a child myself. But looking around and reading what I read about behavioral traits and trends, it seems children are more stressed, more filled with anxiety than I remember my childhood being. I remember my child, even though I had a very strange and some most people would call it dysfunctional childhood. I was pretty much unaware of it for most of my elementary years. I was just happy-go-lucky, and I don't think kids are happy-go-lucky anymore as they were. But this idea with history that um, it's being revised, or we are revising what we knew about history so much that it creates an uncertainty and an untrust, a distrust in our education system. So, yeah, I mean, things like we can go all day long with specific facts, but things like Pearl Harbor. Do we really know what happened with Pearl Harbor? Is that even taught in schools at this point? Who knows? What I don't even know what schools are teaching. But as as facts that are presented to us change, and ideas change about what really happened and what we were told, and the government could have been lying to us, schools could have been lying to us,
Mhm.
doesn't matter. The fact is, once we find out that we've been lied to or misled, it creates an uncertainty and a distrust of education all around. Yes.
Yes, it certainly does. And what is just as disturbing is the fact that so much of our media has gone along with the idea that the quote experts are the ones that we should turn to get the answers. So again, who are these quote experts? And long ago, when we first had the advent of real mass media, so you had the first television reporters who went on the air and reported the news. They reported the news. I can remember my father watching Walter Cronkite and David Brinkley and listening to the 6 o'clock news. And it was largely news. I mean, the reporters basically presented the facts of what happened. They didn't have these panels of quote journalists or the quote experts coming on and giving their opinions and then saying, okay, so this is the news of the day. Uh, that's not really the news of the day. You are presenting what happened as an event, but then you're spending all the time talking about what a couple of people say about it. And then what is the listener supposed to do? Well, they're supposed to listen to these people talk about it and then maybe think about, who do I agree with? So, who do I agree with? Then maybe you go on social media and you see what other people are saying, and you see, well, I like this person, so I think their opinion is probably more valid than that
Yeah.
person's opinion. And again, this cycle with the algorithms, how we are fed over and over again the opinions of the people that we have
Yeah.
clicked on
The echo
and tend
chamber.
to agree with. It's just kind of a never-ending cycle. So we're not even given that basic information anymore. And in fact, there are historians who have fallen into this trap and, always seem to align with one side, either the left, the right, or, a particular group, progressive, conservative, whatever it be. And then that gets reinforced, reinforced, reinforced. And if you read historians today, if you look very carefully, you can see that underlying bias in what they're writing. So my concern is that in future years, children and young adults who are reading these historians are going to be getting fed that bias along with the history.
Of course, of
And
course.
it's just going to, like, steamroll over and over and over again. So how do we get out of this
Well,
trap?
if I can just push back just a little bit here, because I feel like um, uh, as we get older, this is a natural thing. We kind of look back nostalgically at the past. Now, you brought up Walter Cronkite, and yes, I agree that it was more because we didn't have it 24/7 at the time, that it
Mhm.
was and only a half an hour, the news was presented, but there was opinion, that was delivered on every single broadcast. It was set reserved for the last few minutes of a half hour, but Walter Cronkite changed America's opinion on the involvement in Vietnam. He was looked at as a very trustworthy kind of guy, and people drew their opinions from him on both sides of the aisle. The left and right kind of both uh, trusted him equally. But when he came out and said that his opinion that we were wasting our time in Vietnam and it was a war that could not be won, that changed America's opinion and changed the course of the war. So to sit, I just that whole nostalgic look that we used to just get straight news. We used to get a half hour. We didn't get
Right.
24/7.
No, definitely. We weren't just subjected to the bombardment,
Right, yeah.
constant.
And so, yeah, and it's become 24/7 in entertainment, and so we have to fill that time with something. There's only so many big stories in a day, and once you've covered those, 24 hours is a lot of time. So you get a lot of people talking, and that's when a lot of opinions come in, and people, gravitate towards whichever network serves their bias and all that kind of stuff, and that's where we are today. But I want to get to this comment by Craig because I think it's kind of relevant here. He says they don't teach or analyze 9/11. I've gone through three kids all born during that time. They don't really know what happened. And you brought up Walter Cronkite, but I was talking about his involvement in Vietnam. I don't think they even and maybe I've been out of school so long and haven't had kids in this time period, but I don't think they even teach Vietnam yet in schools thoroughly or on a level where people can really understand what happened. So I would be really surprised if they were up to speed on 9/11 at this point because I don't think they're up to the war from 70 years ago, 60, 70 years ago. So
Well, they will touch on it, and again, you would hope that there are certain teachers who would be sensitive enough to draw out a bit of conversation about it. But that's another problem with the schools today. What I noticed over the course of my career, and my career dealt with elementary up to 7th grade with the general population, and then later I went into special education with very young children. So I wasn't dealing with the high school level. But I did uh, notice that over the course of time, teachers have become more and more a cog in this whole public school administrative system, which is somewhat controlled by politics and government because so much of the money comes through the government. So if a child is attending public school, the public school is getting funds from the state primarily, but there are so many grants that are available from the federal government that I would venture to say there is mm, not many a school district who will not try to compete to get some of this federal grant money. With the federal grant money comes a lot of strings, because once you get into money from the federal government, the um, the grant stipulates that you must do this, this, and this, and this must be taught. And often the grants go through very large corporations who are basically lobbyists affiliated with political interests. So the curriculum will come through some private organization, but they have a very much political agenda. So
Yeah.
all of this is filtered into the schools. Then there are the teachers' unions. So in a very large school district, a major city, or it could be a suburban area as well, you have the very powerful teachers unions who are very much allied with political interests. And
If I could just stop you there for 1 second, because this has got me really confused. Because I've heard that powerful teachers unions said at least 3 or 4 times in the last week and a half, and that phrase has got me in fits. Now, because I heard that our race problem in America was driven by the powerful teachers union. I was like, powerful teachers union. What if the teachers unions are as powerful as I'm being led to believe they are? Why are teachers not paid well? And somebody told me, well, if you look at our test scores of children, that proves that the teachers are overpaid. And I was like, well, it's not on the teacher to prepare the student to go to school. That's on the parents. We want to talk about responsibility all the time, but so this question about teachers unions being powerful, are they really? Because first of all, do we agree that teachers are vastly underpaid in America?
for the most part, they are vastly underpaid, except in the very, very largest cities, where they receive sometimes double, almost triple of some of the teachers in a small uh, area. So there are places where teachers, believe it or not, are still being paid uh, $30,000 a year.
Right. So if
Whereas in a major city, they may start at 50,
even
$60,000 a
that's
year.
not good money in New York City, $50,000 is not enough to survive on. To be
Well,
honest
yeah,
with
that's the other thing. Of course, everything else is so expensive. It's not. But yeah, so in terms of the individual teacher, they are certainly not rewarded for the work they do. But in what I really was talking about was they do align with a certain political agenda due to where this money is coming from. The administrators have largely taken control, and I saw that develop over my career. So I started out in a private school and I stayed there for a long time. I became aware that, it was a very much a factory model kind of system. The classes were pretty large. The children were taught one way simply because there weren't the resources to do things several different ways, that we didn't have the staff, we didn't have the money. It was more of the factory model. But then I became aware that children learn in different ways. That's how I got into special education. So I went into special education because I wanted to be able to reach children by teaching uh, by different methods and using different resources.
let's come back to that in just one moment, because I have something I've been talking about forever. I think that part of our problem with our educational system is it's a one size fits all, and we have to kind of open our minds to the fact that individuals are individuals. People learn different ways, and I appreciate that we're going to go there. But I just want to, because on the teachers union thing, I'm not disagreeing that there is a political agenda behind that, but there's a possible solution in what, or somewhat of a solution, in what we're talking about here. If the teachers' unions are driven by political agenda because of where the money are coming from, they're not really serving their constituents, which are the teachers. The teachers are not benefiting from the union. Teachers themselves, the individual teachers, are not benefiting from the union that supposedly represents them. And so I think part of the solution is the teachers recognizing that they're not being served by their own union and saying, hey, take care of us. We know how to educate the children best. And, you know, we're not going to support a union that is in bed with political or corporate entities and special interests. Do you agree with anything I just said?
That would be wonderful. But the problem is, in the larger school districts and even in some of the smaller ones, the number of administrators has increased dramatically. I think it's something like there were maybe 3 times more. You can't quote me exactly on this, but maybe 3 times more than there were 20 years ago. So you have now a top-heavy administration.
And they want to keep those
Well, they
job
want to
reserves.
keep control, but the administration wants to please the outlets that are giving them the money. So they will go along with their curriculum. And in order to do that, they'll tell the teachers, you have to teach this curriculum. And I ran into this personally. I butted heads with administration because they wanted me to teach a certain way, almost scripted. So if I would go off script and try to do it a different way, I would get into trouble. And for teachers who want to get tenure, who want to stay in a particular school system, this becomes a real problem because if they butt heads with that administration, they're going to meet real resistance and they may even lose their job. They'll be on that, the little blacklist. So that's been a big problem. The growth of administration and the administration allied with the interests that are giving them the money, whether it be directly political, private corporations, and again, this whole Common Core idea that we're all working together to bring all of our children, no matter where they come from, and here. Where do our children come from? Well, that's the gamut. So we have all different cultures, all different races, all different religions, all different languages. So the teachers are all working with all of those obstacles, that are preventing them from trying to impose this one model top down that's going to bring everybody up, because even these tests, that are used to determine the standards have all kinds of flaws in them,
Right.
because the children don't even if they understand the basic language of the test, they may not understand the culture behind it. So if they're given a reading passage that talks about something that is familiar to one part of American culture, it may not be familiar to three other parts of American culture. So, the children have that as an obstacle too. So the
Sure.
teachers are working with all of this, trying to get through to the kids. And so many teachers, I know, that would like to reach the kids and know different approaches that might work in reaching those kids aren't able to implement them. So,
It doesn't sound, and usually I'm the pessimist voice on the program, almost every issue, but it doesn't sound like you're very hopeful for the education system to improve in America. Am I taking a wrong
well,
tone
I'm
from
talking about the public school
public schools?
education.
Right.
I think we're wrong to believe that there's a one size fits all
I
approach
I
to teaching and a one size fits all way or school or environment of teaching. I think that the money should follow the child. I believe in all different types of education, that, whatever the parent who knows the child best should be able to determine a type of education for their child. Now there are many possibilities, and this is one the probably the only good thing that came out of COVID, that parents became aware exactly what was going on behind the curtain. They really began to see what was being taught and the way it was being taught because the education was virtual. They were home. They saw what their children were learning, were not learning. And a lot of parents became very uneasy with this public school education. They decided, well, there's got to be another way. And they started to take charge. So, what did parents do? Some of them went with homeschooling. For the first time, they began to investigate that. They got innovative with that. So, some parents decided, well, I don't have the ability to teach my child all day, every day. Maybe we could get together. So they got together and they formed homeschool co ops. So the teaching was divided, among different people, and they would take turns. So the child would have multiple teachers. Some of them started to look at charter schools more seriously, and charter schools can be a good option because generally with a charter school you have small classes, you have teachers that are geared to working more individually with the children, and a lot of charter schools are based on a particular focus. So it might better suit a child who has a passion for something or a particular interest. So you have charter schools that focus on the arts or music, charter schools that focus on science or STEM, or charter schools that are more hands on. You have more parents looking at vocational schools. And I think that's one of the really sad parts of our education system because so many children are talented with their hands and would really excel if they were given the ability early on to pursue that vocational interest, whether it be aviation or automotive or plumbing or electrical, whatever it might be. And I think we should pay a lot more attention to vocational education. Look what's happened to manufacturing in this country,
that
how it has
well
declined.
That happened when I was in school, right around the time I was getting ready to go to high school. They were developing plans of vocational study, cooperative with here in New York or here on Long Island. A place called Lewis. I forget it now. Um, Lewis Tech, I believe it was. But basically, kids would spend a morning in school or morning at the vocational place, and then the other half of the day, a half day academic and half day on vocational skills. And they were picking up. To me though, that always felt like people determining your future for you, saying because at that age, right, we're talking about 12, 13 years old, you're getting ready for high school. You don't know what you want to do. And although you may have a talent for mechanics or carpentry or whatever it is they're going to send you to vocational school, you kind of giving up on or telling that kid you're going to be a mechanic. We don't have. You're not going to be an academic kid. Now we know there are late bloomers and there are people who can acquire a really strong interest in academics later on in life. So it felt like predetermining somebody's life for them. That's what it felt like for me. Like,
Well, maybe it was then, but I mean, I'm talking about kids being able to try different things because that's one
no, I
thing I
agree.
firmly believe that parents have to teach children certain core values. Independent, hopefully the schools will reinforce them. They may or may not. But I believe in allowing a child to fail. We learn a
Yeah.
lot more from our failures than we do from our successes. So if a child has an idea, it might be a momentary passion that will last 6 months, but I believe in a parent encouraging the child to try different things, even if the parent may not particularly like that particular thing. So, we have so many helicopter parents today who just want to protect their children from failure. I've got to protect my kid, and my kid has to succeed at everything. The trophy for every child kind of syndrome. A child tries something, then they need to be rewarded. Well, let the child try something, and if the child fails, the child fails. The
Yeah.
child learns from that experience, and then we'll move on, and as children do, they will very rapidly find something else to try. But that's something that parents need to do, and parents need to do that in order to encourage so many other life skills. Like if you let a child fail, you encourage them to become independent. You encourage them to say, well, I'm unique and I tried this, it didn't work. But I'm just going to pick myself up. I'm going to be resilient. In the back of the kid's mind may not know that. But if a child fails a couple of times and then keeps trying something else because you encourage them to try whatever they decide they want to do, within limits, of course, and
Right.
within financial possibility. If a child decides that they want to have private tennis lessons, or they want to become an expert horseback rider, equestrian, which is going to cost thousands of dollars, and the parents don't have that money. Of course, there have to be limits, but let them try, let them fail, let them learn to be resilient, let them learn to be independent, let them learn to take responsibility when they succeed. Great. When they fail, they have to own that as well. So this is all part of what a parent needs to do, and so many parents are uh, so overwhelmed by everything else they need to do, they just kind of give up, and
Yeah.
and
Well,
and they leave it to the schools. Well, let the schools do that. That's education, that's their purview.
okay.
I
I hear what you're saying there, and I wanted to kind of stop you a little bit earlier when you were talking about homeschooling, because there is this kind of duality. Yeah, leave it to the schools. We want to leave it to the schools, but we're not happy with what the schools are teaching our kids. We want to homeschool them. Then you get people homeschooling. There's no way of sugarcoating this. They were barely past high school themselves. They're not really qualified to teach their own children. I know of somebody who was homeschooling during COVID, who is an avid flat Earth believer. Uh, Now, I would not want that person teaching in school, and I don't think anybody who believes in archaic ideas like the Earth is flat should be teaching children history or science or any of that kind of stuff. But we had a lot of those. And so there's this duality of the schools aren't doing it where we want to have a more active education, but we also so busy we don't have time for it, and they're leave it to the schools. There's that you can't have it both ways. Are you going to leave it to the schools, or if you're going to be a homeschool your kids, a home educator, it's imperative that you go back and get yourself some education before you do that.
Well, I think that may be the case, but I think most parents will not too far into the process realize that, and as the child gets older the child will realize that, and a lot of children will seek out their own, avenues of educating themselves, or finding another way,
Right,
suggesting, in some cases the child may even hear from a friend, or get an idea, uh, to pursue something else,
right.
but through
So
socialization. Because, of course, during COVID, the kids were isolated too. So
yeah, that's
they
true.
didn't have the ability to socialize with their friends, which, on a positive note, uh they weren't being inundated with.
Indoctrinated.
Yeah, well, but now, what happens now, social media becomes more and more and more important every year. And as the child gets older, and matures, the older the child gets, the more important it is to fit in with those peers, and to kind of uh, go along with whatever that social
Right.
aspect is being fed to them. And that's another thing parents have to really monitor and control.
Right. I want to talk about interest in, and because the premise of what we're here talking about is 14 reasons you need to know history. And I do think it is important to know history, but for young people, sometimes interest isn't always there, and how you stir that interest. Now, I want to come back to that idea, which is why I just said that, so I don't forget. I put that out there. But you talk about social media, what China is, and I don't know if people are aware of this. TikTok in the West is not the TikTok that China serves to their own children. So, in here in the West, it's all about jokes and dancing and 1 minute silly clips or stuff like that. In China, they ban all that stuff, and their TikTok
Hmm.
is only educational stuff, science experiments, things that encourage critical thinking and research and stuff like that. So there's that part of it. Do you think the government has any role in censoring? Not censoring is a scary word, but in controlling social media so that, especially for kids, I'm talking about for people who are in still in school, in school age, K through 12, uh, controlling social media for those that age group.
Well, I think if you're only giving one side of the story, it's always bad. And they're getting 360 from what they're getting in China. I mean, in China, it's Kuman on steroids. It's like another way of educating the children in the communist ideology. And I visited China in 2004, and I could see that in the kids, how they were almost
Yeah, the indoctrination.
robotic. I mean,
Yeah,
they were sweet, but they were all fitting again into that one
children
kind
of
of
the state.
mold. Right, children of the state. And even in um s- their private life, they're children of the state. I mean, if a child has in China, if a child is a talented dancer, that child doesn't go to private school to get lessons in ballet or tap. No, the state will take them away from the family. They will put them in a special school. They will train them, and they will teach them to excel, whether the child really wants to do that. And what happens to some of these children is, in the beginning, they might be very interested in this hobby or pursuit, and then it becomes a
A
nightmare
job,
for them,
yeah, a job, right.
because they're 12 hours a day. They are rigorously trained. And then you have the children that come from the provinces that are poor, and they just want to help support their family. So some of these kids are taken from the rural parts of China, and they're brought into a city to do a particular task like weaving rugs. So a child might be brought in to spend hours and hours a day and hand weaving the threads for these rugs. And after about 10 or 14 years, something that was the average, I think that they told us, uh, their eyesight was so poor they couldn't do it anymore. But they did it because they were given money to send home to help support the family. So there's all kinds of, ways to control them.
Right.
Here in America, how can they control us?
I
Well,
don't
they
know.
they
That was
can
the question.
control us by manipulating the media. So they teach us to, forget about the academic pursuits, forget about pursuing science and math and literature and understanding the world about us. No, they want us to spend time with, the dancing videos, the jokes, the ha ha ha. And what again? What do? They push that child to the forefront, fitting in with all because all their other friends are watching TikTok.
Right.
I mean, you've got to be watching TikTok, and you've got to go on, and then you've got to imitate these people and show your friends how talented you are. What's this going to do for you 10 years from now? How is that going to help our economy grow? It's not.
No,
So,
no.
this is what they're doing. And the scariest part is they're collecting the data.
Right.
So,
Um, but now coming back to interest, because and we only have a few minutes here, and I think this is important. It not that long ago, but seems like ancient history now. I remember talking to my son and my nephew. They were 5 and 7 years old about what they were interested in. And they were interested in video games. This is 35 years
mm.
ago now, because but interested in video games, interested in wrestling, no, they of course they didn't say history. History is about generally old people, and young kids are not interested in old people. So how do you create or encourage interest in history in young school age children?
Well, what I tell children when I meet with them in person, especially, and they look at me initially like I have two heads, but I tell them that the moment you were born, you became a character in history, and they kind of look at me, and I tell them that history is not a series of facts and dates, but it's stories of people just like them. So when you are born, you become a part of a family, and that family has a history. So your ancestors came perhaps from a different place. They brought with them certain aspects of culture. They had a particular religion. They had a particular way of earning a living. They had certain cultural traditions, like they ate certain foods and they dressed a certain way, perhaps. They had certain rituals or certain things that they would do. It might be a parade, it might be an annual event where they got together, it could be a family reunion. And this is all something that we carry on because we're going to bring a part of that to our living today, the way we live today, and then we're going to pass that on to our children. And then I tell them that everything has a history. You don't just plop and suddenly begin. There's always something preceding it. So art has a history, music has a history. Um, think of anything, and something came before it. So I try to explain it to them in that manner. Then I extend it out and I say, as you get a little bit older, you go out into the community and you make friends. you're drawn to a certain group of people because they have certain ideas or customs or interests that are similar to yours. And that's the way communities started. People were drawn together because of for many reasons. It might be religious. They got together and formed a religious community. It could be that they needed to do certain work and they settled in a certain place because the ability for them to do their work was there. They formed communities, and now they're part of that larger community. And then I talk to them about communities have certain responsibilities toward each other as citizens. Eventually, I bring it out as they get older to the larger world, that global perspective. All of us in our little communities are connected, especially now in the 21st century with instant communication to a larger world. And we have to learn to deal with that larger world. There are certain problems, there are certain things that we have to help each other with, and we have to figure out solutions to conflicts and things that we disagree on. We have to
Right.
learn that there's not just one answer, that there's not just one way. We have to have respect for other people's opinions. We have to be honest. We have to share and we have to persevere. We have to always understand that things don't happen overnight
All
and
right.
it's a
Uh,
continuing process.
we are out of time. bmauthor.me. And then that's where you're going to go to the site. And to the blog, it's 14 hyphen reasons hyphen you hyphen need hyphen history. Uh, the link's in the description to make it easy for people. All that being said, I appreciate you being here. Are you an optimist for the educational system and for uh, children being more interested in history and the value of history?
I'm always an optimist because my little character who narrates my children's book series, Little Miss History, is an optimist. She wears rose colored glasses. She always looks on the bright side of things. And I think that with all the chaos and all the turmoil that we've gone through, I think that people are waking up to the idea uh, that we are all in this together. There are many, many problems in our educational system. I think we are now more aware. I think more and more parents are fighting for the best for their children. I think teachers will continue to fight. And I think that there are chinks in the armor. I think all of this craziness, this kind of idea that we need to be controlled, we can't think for ourselves. I think people are rebelling against that, and I think that a lot of it will come toppling down. I'm confident that we will find a way of controlling it and bringing our independence and rational thinking and
I hope you're right. I will say that I don't share your optimism, but I hope you're right.
I think it will take time,
Oh yeah.
but I think it will happen over time
Okay.
because history is cyclical.
Yeah,
It does, it changes and it moves and
that's true.
it morphs
I
into
think of it
something
as a
new.
pendulum because we do live in a world that is dictated by ideologies left and right, and I think the pendulum wants to sit in the center, but the harder we push it one way or the other, the harder it's going to kick back. And getting it to rest in the center is the trick, and that's a different thing. That's a different challenge. It requires some passivity. Eh, but anyway, I appreciate you being here. I hope we this was a compelling enough conversation for people to check out your website and check out what you do. The books are for kids to read on their own, or is it for teachers to share with kids or
Well,
parents?
it can be either. The books are multimedia picture illustrated, so the pictures play a large part. There are portraits, there are actual photographs of the sites that we visit. They're
Cool.
interactive. They encourage critical thinking. I ask children questions. I bring out little known facts and people of history, and I want to encourage them to see history as all inclusive, not focusing on a particular group or a particular ideology. So that's my mission. My mission is the critical thinking within the books, and that's my jumping off point. But then I also, on my other social media channels like YouTube, I educate and bring in teaching videos for parents, for teachers. So my books are meant to be focused on a target audience of K through 6, but adults tell me they learn so much as well. So that always makes me feel good that, oh, I never knew that. That was something I was interested to find out about. So that's my mission, to make everybody more aware of history, its importance, and the fact that we all need to learn to think critically and independently.
I support all of that, and that's a good place to end it. Thank you for coming here, and have a great day. Thanks for getting up early and sharing this with my audience
Oh,
today.
thank you so much for inviting me. I
Y-
enjoyed it.
Have a great day. Bye for now.
Bye bye.
Barbara Ann Mojica, folks. History is important. I'll say this, my takeaway on this. Teachers can do the best job they can possibly do, that we want them to do. At the end of the day, because we talk about having respect for other people's opinions, critical thinking, and all this stuff. That's all good stuff, and it's all. I support the idea of sharing that with children wholeheartedly. But at the end of the day, if the kid spends that time in school learning critical thinking and learning to respect other people's opinions, and then goes home to Gen X dad who says, "I fought World War II." No, you didn't. You were the MTV generation. Well, my day we threw punches. Um, this is what I'm dealing with lately. Gen X guys who are delusional about how they had it so tough growing up in the 80s. But these are the parents of today, and they are counter to what we want children to learn in respect for other people's opinions and critical thinking and testing data. They're all, now it's my way or the highway. Gen X dad really, really stubbornly wanting their kids to be a model of who they are now, forgetting all their own personal history. The other part I would like to comment on is knowing your own history. That's a good place to start with developing interest in it. Now, I will openly admit that I don't know that much, hardly enough about my own personal history. I know my grandfather, James Aloysius Larkin, came here from Ireland at 5 years old as an orphan. Don't know anything about his family other than that, how he ended up being an orphan at 5 years old and coming to this country. I know his older sister, was here in New York City. That's all I know. My maternal grandmother's roots are in Germany. Don't know anything about her family there. My father's roots are in Italy. My paternal grandmother and grandfather, their roots were in Italy. Don't know a lot about them. I know my grandmother had 17 children from 3 different husbands. Maybe she killed two of or all 3 of them. They all died before I was born. Maybe she was a killer. But I don't know anything about her family. So much I don't know about my own personal history. I think that's a good place to get people and kids especially interested, and I wish I was disinterested much earlier in my life. I became interested later in life. But I think that's a great place to start because we talk about these cultural influences and history is part of all of us. Anyway, I'm rambling. Don't have a show tonight. Tomorrow, Doc Peterson will be my guest. Doc Peterson is a very funny comedian and very cutting edge and a little bit on the dirty side. So he'll be with me tomorrow morning, and I appreciate your thoughts. See that Carl has landed in the UK. I'm assuming he's back in the UK. The time zone's got him screwed up. Well, I hope he's safe travels and done with the airport craziness. Um, anyway, what is this one? Either he puts on a New York City accent in person, or he's faking this one. Me? Oh. Anyway, glad to see you back home and safe and all that stuff. Thanks for joining me today. I will catch you all tomorrow. Hopefully, I'll be here. Hopefully, God willing, I'll be here. And hopefully, you will be too. That's the show for today. I'd love to know what you think. Oh, by the way, Flat Earth Dave is begging me to sue him, which is an interesting story. I meant to talk about at the top of the hour. We'll talk about that tomorrow. Thanks for coming. Have a great rest of your day. And don't forget to turn on your
Turn on the radio. to me, listen to me, listen to me now. Listen to me, listen to me, listen to me now. Listen to me, listen to me, listen to me now.